For thousands of years, people have been ruled by governments. These bodies of power make rules that organize society and are meant to protect it from danger. Many different forms of government have taken shape, from structures where power is concentrated in the hands of one person to those where power is shared among many. These different systems, characterized by how many people are in charge, how they are chosen, and how they rule, have massive consequences for the relationship between governments and their people.
Good day, everyone. Today we are here in front of you to present one of the branches of power in the Philippines, namely the legislative branch. But before we start our presentation, let me introduce myself and my members. Firstly, I am your webinar moderator, Mr. Justin Reblon, and here's my fellow webinar moderator, Ms. Aisini Ponce, and my not just one but 8 fellow speakers for today's webinar. Ms. Nikki Angela Cabahog, Mr. John Christian Gulfan, Mr. Chris J. Lacre, Ms. Justin Kate Valenos, Mr. Rovi Brian Mendoza, Ms. Nims Danica Briones, and Mr. Renard Ramirez. And last but not the least, Ms. Rayona May Diaz.
Today's topic is subdivided into 4 major parts. The first one is the definition of legislative branch, which will be discussed by Nims Danicasu. And second is the Senate and House of Representatives, which will be discussed by Renard Ramirez. And third one is the powers and functions of Congress, which will be discussed by Nikki Angela Cabahog. And lastly, number 4 is the process of lawmaking, which will be discussed by John Christian Gulfan. Without further ado, let's begin our presentation.
The Philippines is a republic with a presidential form of government, wherein power is equally divided among its 3 branches, namely executive, legislative, and judicial. But however, at this juncture, we are going to focus only in the legislative branch.
What is the legislative branch? The legislative branch creates the laws which the executive implements and which the judiciary interprets. This is known as legislative power. The policies needed to address issues such as poverty, welfare, economic development, criminality, social justice, human rights, and many others are usually in the form of laws created by state's legislature, aka the legislative branch. The legislative branch is authorized to make laws, alter and repeal them through the power vested in the Philippine Congress. Now, what is the Philippine Congress?
The Congress of the Philippines is the bicameral, means having 2 branches or chambers, legislature of the Philippines. It consists of the Senate of the House of Representatives. It is composed of 24 senators who shall be elected at large by the qualified voters of the Philippines, as may be provided by law, while the House of Representatives shall be composed of not more than 250 unless otherwise fixed by law. 20% of whom must be party list representatives. The House of Representatives is elected by district proportional representation or PR. District proportional representation characterizes electoral systems in which divisions in an electorate are reflected proportionately in the elected body. The concept applies mainly to geographical and political divisions of the electorate. Members of the House of Representatives serves 3-year terms and are considered for re-election every even year. Senators, however, serve 6-year terms and elections to the Senate are staggered over even years so that only about 1/3 of the Senate is up for re-election during any election.
What are the qualifications for the House of Representatives and Senates? The qualifications to become a senator, as stipulated in the Constitution, are natural-born citizen of the Philippines, at least 35 years old, is able to read and write, a registered voter, and a resident of the Philippines for not less than 2 years before election day. Meanwhile, the Constitution provides for the following criteria to become a member of the House of Representatives. A natural-born citizen of the Philippines, at least 25 years old, is able to read and write and accept the party list representatives, a registered voter, and a resident for at least 1 year in the district where he or she shall be elected.
Powers and functions of the Congress. The 1987 Constitution sets limits to the Congress' exercise of power to create laws. For instance, the Congress shall not pass a law that abridges the freedom of speech, expressions, and the like. Similarly, it is provided that the Congress may not increase appropriations recommended by the President, that the role of taxation shall be uniform and equitable, and the tax exemption to charitable institutions and the like shall be provided. Article 6, Section 29. The member of the Congress shall be the only judge of that contest related to the elections, returns, and qualifications of their respective members through the House and Senate electoral tribunals. The Senate shall be also have the sole power to decide on all cases of impeachment by 2/3 votes. The Congress may also punish its members for disorderly behavior. Article 6, Section 16.
With respect to international relations, the Congress also exercises functions known as diplomatic powers. The following are good examples. First is a declaration of the existence of a state of war in Article 6, Section 23, Paragraph 1. The second one is granting of emergency powers to the President in times of war or emergency in Article 6, Section 23, Paragraph 2. And lastly, the no treaty or international agreement shall be valid and effective unless concurred in by at least 2/3 of all the members of the Senate in Article 7, Section 21.
Resolutions convey principles and sentiments of the Senate or the House of Representatives. These resolutions can further be divided into 3 different elements.
These resolutions can further be divided into 3 different elements, which are joint resolutions, concurrent resolutions, and simple resolutions. Joint resolutions require the approval of both chambers of Congress and the signature of the President, and have the force and effect of a law if approved. Concurrent resolutions, used for matters affecting the operation of both chambers of Congress, and must be approved in the same form by both houses, but are not transmitted to the President for his signature, and therefore have no force and effect of a law. Simple resolutions deal with the matters entirely within the prerogative of one chamber of Congress, are not referred to the President for his signature, and therefore have no force and effect of a law. Bills, on the other hand, are laws in the making. They pass into law when they are approved by both houses and the President of the Philippines. A bill may be voted on by the President, but the House of Representatives may overturn a presidential vote by garnering a 2/3 vote. If the President does not act on a proposed law submitted by Congress, it will lapse into law after 30 days of receipt.
The summary of lawmaking process. Preparation of the bill. First reading. Committee consideration or action. Second reading. Third reading. transmittal of approval bill to where other house where procedures 1 to 5 also happens. Conference committee if there are differences and disagreements. Submission of the bill to the President. Presidential action to the bill.
And that will conclude our discussion. Thank you so much for everyone for listening. I hope everyone grasped all the information me and my groupmates tried to convey. Once again, thank you and fidelity to Christ.